1945. Manhattan is a shimmering postcard of holiday excess. Mid-level executives in wool overcoats rush toward Grand Central, their breaths blooming in the frigid 5-degree air. The smell of roasted chestnuts competes with the metallic tang of the city's exhaust. It is the height of the rush hour, and Midtown is a gridlocked hive of commerce and celebration. But on East 46th Street, just outside the glowing windows of Sparks Steakhouse, the festive atmosphere is about to be punctured by a violent symphony that will rewrite the history of American organized crime. At the center of this impending storm is a black Lincoln Continental, crawling through the sludge of melted snow. Inside sits Paul Castellano, known as the Pope of the Gambino crime family. At 70 years old, Castellano is a man of the boardroom, not the back alley. He rules from a hilltop mansion on Staten Island he calls the White House, detached and increasingly isolated from the soldiers who bleed for his bottom line. Beside him is his underboss, Thomas Bellotti. They are arriving for a pre-Christmas dinner, unaware that they are being watched by eyes as cold as the New York winter. Across the street, a man with silver-streaked hair and a face etched in arrogant ambition sits in a parked car, watching the Lincoln pull to the curb. This is John Gotti. For Gotti, this isn't just a hit, it's a Darwinian necessity. Castellano had forbidden his men from dealing heroin on pain of death. Yet Gotti's crew was deep in the trade. With the FBI closing in and Castellano's patience evaporating, Gotti knew that if he didn't strike first, he would be the one ending up in a shallow grave. At exactly 5:26 p.m., the Lincoln comes to a halt. As Castellano steps out onto the pavement, the world slows to a crawl. 4 men in light-colored trench coats and matching Russian-style fur hats emerge from the shadows like ghosts. They move with a rehearsed, lethal synchronicity. Before the Pope can even register the danger, the air is ripped apart by the roar of semi-automatic fire. The forensic reality of the scene is a study in cold-blooded precision. 6 shots find their mark in Castellano's head and torso. The .38 caliber rounds shatter the evening's peace, turning the pristine sidewalk into a grisly mosaic of crimson and bone. Bellotti, attempting to scramble from the driver's side, is met with an equally relentless hail of lead. The silent witnesses left behind, the spent brass casings and the shattered glass of the Lincoln, tell the story of a tactical ambush executed with military discipline. There was no hesitation, no mercy. As the shooters vanish into the surging crowd of panicked commuters, the car containing John Gotti slowly cruises past the carnage. He looks down at the crumpled body of his predecessor, a man who once held the power of life and death over thousands. In that moment, the crown of the Gambino family, the most powerful criminal organization in the United States, is no longer in the hands of the old guard. It has been seized by a new kind of monster, one who doesn't hide in the shadows, but thrives in the spotlight. The sirens begin to wail in the distance, a low, mournful howl that signals the end of the Mafia's silent era. The Midtown Massacre would become the defining image of the 1980s Underworld, a public execution that proved the old rules of omerta were dead. John Gotti had just committed the ultimate sin in the world of the Cosa Nostra. He had murdered his boss without the commission's blessing. He had ascended to the throne through a river of blood, becoming the most famous gangster since Al Capone. But as the flashbulbs of the press began to illuminate his smug, handsome face in the coming months, a different kind of light was being shed in a dark room miles away. The FBI wasn't just watching the streets, they were already inside his inner circle, and the very tapes that would build his legend would eventually become the nails in his coffin. The Teflon Don had just taken his first step toward immortality, unaware that his greatest ally was about to become his most lethal ghost. But as the flashbulbs of the press began to illuminate his smug, handsome face in the coming months, a different kind of light was being shed in a dark room miles away. The FBI wasn't just watching the streets. They were already inside his inner circle, and the very tapes that would build his legend would eventually become the nails in his coffin. The Teflon Don had just taken his first step toward immortality, unaware that his greatest ally was about to become his most lethal ghost. By 1987, the myth of John Gotti was impenetrable. The media had rebranded him the Dapper Don, a nod to his hand-painted silk ties and those signature silver locks, always perfectly coiffed. But to the Department of Justice, he was a recurring nightmare. 3 times they brought him to trial, for assault, for racketeering, for the very lifeblood of the Gambino Empire. And 3 times, Gotti walked out of the courtroom a free man. The Teflon was real. Charges simply wouldn't stick. Whether it was through a coerced jury or a witness who suddenly developed a terminal case of amnesia, Gotti seemed to possess a supernatural immunity to the law. But hubris is a heavy cloak. While Gotti was basking in the adoration of the neighborhood and the frustration of the feds, the FBI's C-16 squad was pivoting. They realized they couldn't beat Gotti on the street. They had to catch him in the one place he felt safe. That place was the Ravenite Social Club at 247 Mulberry Street. It was a humble, dimly lit storefront, but it was the undisputed throne room of the American Mafia. The Bureau's technical experts performed a high-wire surveillance ballet. They didn't just bug the club, they went higher. They managed to plant a tiny, high-fidelity microphone in the apartment of Nettie Sorelli, located directly above the club. It was here, in the quiet sanctuary of a widow's living room, that Gotti held his most sensitive walk and talks. These weren't just conversations, they were the audio blueprint of a criminal enterprise. For hundreds of hours, the silent witness of the magnetic tape spun, capturing the rasping, arrogant voice of the King of New York. This was the forensic gold the FBI had prayed for. On these tapes, Gotti wasn't the charming neighborhood benefactor. He was a cold, narcissistic tactician. He spoke with chilling casualness about murders, about making new members, and, most crucially, he spoke about his underboss, Sammy the Bull Gravano. Sammy was the Gambino family's heavy lifter. If Gotti was the peacock, Sammy was the claws. He was loyal to a fault, a man of the old school who believed in the sacred oath of omerta. But the tapes revealed a betrayal that no amount of loyalty could stomach. In the privacy of that upstairs apartment, Gotti was heard belittling Gravano, blaming him for the family's legal heat, and worse, positioning Sammy to take the fall for a string of murders that Gotti himself had sanctioned. The psychological profile of John Gotti began to emerge through these recordings. He was a man who loved the crown more than the men who helped him wear it. On December 11th, 1990, the FBI finally closed the trap. They raided the Ravenite, hauling Gotti, Gravano, and consigliere Frank Locascio into custody. In a stark interrogation room, the FBI played their ace. They didn't beat Sammy Gravano. They simply handed him a pair of headphones. As the reels turned, Sammy heard the voice of the man he had killed for, the man he had protected, describing him as a greedy liability who needed to be reined in. The look on Sammy's face wasn't just one of anger. It was the look of a man realizing he was already a dead man walking within his own family. The FBI offered him a deal, a way out of the life in exchange for the one thing Gotti thought he owned: Sammy's silence. The walls of the Ravenite were talking, and for the first time in his life, the Teflon Don was about to find out exactly what happens when the coating begins to peel. Sammy the Bull was no longer a soldier. He was a weapon, and he was pointed directly at the heart of the Gambino family. The FBI's masterstroke wasn't a lucky break. It was a masterpiece of electronic surveillance. They had managed to bug a private apartment 2 floors above the Ravenite Social Club, a sanctuary where Gotti felt safe enough to let his guard down. These tapes became the silent witnesses to his undoing. In those grainy, low-fidelity recordings, the dapper Don's voice didn't sound like a hero of the people. It sounded like a paranoid tyrant. He spoke of murders with the casual indifference of a man ordering a deli sandwich, but more importantly, he spoke of Sammy Gravano. He disparaged his loyal underboss, calling him a mad dog and a greedy liability. He was setting the stage to make Sammy the fall guy for years of Gambino bloodshed. When federal agents played those tapes for Gravano in a sterile interrogation room, the world shifted on its axis. For the Bull, it wasn't just a betrayal, it was a clinical revelation. The sacred bond of omerta, the blood oath that had defined his entire adult life, was a one-way street. Gotti wasn't a brother. He was a predator willing to sacrifice his most loyal soldier to save his own tailored suit. In that moment, the fierce loyalty that had made Sammy the most feared enforcer in New York curdled into a cold, calculating desire for survival. In November 1991, the unthinkable happened. The Bull walked into the light and became a government witness. The trial that followed in 1992 was the final act of a Shakespearean tragedy played out in a Brooklyn courtroom. Gotti arrived every day like he was heading to a red carpet premiere, his hair silver and perfectly coiffed, his smile flashing for the gauntlet of photographers. But inside, the atmosphere was funereal. The jury sat in rapt silence as Sammy Gravano took the stand. The two men, once the twin pillars of the Gambino empire, never locked eyes. Sammy's testimony was a staccato rhythm of death, detailing 19 murders, including the clinical execution of Paul Castellano. He didn't just provide evidence, he provided a map of the Gambino soul. On April 2nd, 1992, at 11:35 a.m., the Teflon finally disintegrated. The forewoman read the verdict: guilty on all 13 counts, including murder and racketeering. Gotti's face remained a mask of stone, but the myth was shattered. He was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole, traded from the velvet seats of Manhattan lounges for a concrete box in Marion, Illinois. For 10 years, Gotti withered in a cell, far from the neon glow of the city he thought he owned. The throat cancer that eventually claimed him was a slow, agonizing thief, robbing him of the very voice he had used to command an army of killers. He died on June 10, 2002, a broken man in a prison hospital. The Gambino family survived, but the era of the celebrity gangster died with the Teflon Don. Today, the Ravenite Social Club is a high-end boutique, its history hidden behind expensive glass. But the chilling truth remains. Gotti's greatest vanity was his belief that he was untouchable. He spent his life orchestrating the silence of others, never realizing that in the end, it was the sound of his own voice that would bury him. The most haunting part of the Gotti legacy isn't the violence, but the realization that even as he took his final breath, he wasn't mourning the lives he took. He was only mourning that the cameras had finally turned away.